If you ever stumble into a place where ambition is seen as a curse and a woman's intellect stirs more fear than a six-shooter, you might just find yourself in Dustmere, a town where tradition clings tighter than a noose and where a clever girl's voice can sound like thunder in a church. Here, progress is a sin, and asking questions is how you get branded a heretic. Tucked into a forgotten bite of the Wild West, Dustmere wasn't on any map worth reading, a land of parched hopes, sun-worn porches, and God-fearing silence. Folks here didn't like change, they liked routine, simple, quiet, unquestioned. That's why when Evelyn Drake rolled in with her suitcase full of science books and fire in her mind, it was like throwing a match into a dry barn. She'd come from the East alone, educated, determined. Within weeks, the schoolhouse once used for storage echoed with questions. Children who once counted marbles were calculating stars, and girls who'd been told to sew were sketching blueprints. Evelyn had dared to light minds on fire, and the town wanted to douse it. They didn't invite her to the town hall to honor her, they summoned her like a criminal. "She's corrupting our youth," barked Sheriff Moulton, his badge more polished than his soul, waving one of Evelyn's books like it carried the plague. "This here talks of planets and old bones, not the word of God." Men nodded like bobbleheads, women stared at the floor, no one spoke up, not for her. Evelyn stood alone, dressed modestly in deep green, copper curls tied back, eyes sharp with resolve. She didn't plead. She didn't cry. "I taught your children to think," she said plainly, "to see the world beyond these hills." "That's exactly the danger," Moulton spat. "You're a wildfire, Miss Drake." By dawn, she wasn't Miss Drake the teacher anymore. She was Evelyn the exile. Her name scratched off the school door, her books trampled in the dirt. She walked through Dustmere, dragging her suitcase, shoulders square. Eyes followed her, some with pity, most with smug relief. The carpenter who once fixed her porch for free turned away. The widow who'd shared soup on cold nights tightened her shawl and scurried off. No goodbyes, just silence. But from the upper floor of the Rusted Spur saloon, a figure watched. Leaned against the balcony with a whiskey glass untouched, his broad hat shadowing a jagged scar that crossed his brow like a forgotten war story. His name wasn't spoken, often only whispered. Cal Thorne. Some called him Stray, quiet, dangerous, and carved out of old regrets. He'd seen towns like this before, places that crucified difference, that feared loud women and quiet truths. Evelyn disappeared over the ridge toward her shack in the pinewoods. Cal didn't follow, but as she vanished, his jaw clenched and the whiskey glass in his hand cracked with a whisper-soft snap. That night, Evelyn lit a single candle in her cabin. Her saved books, what was left, sat beside her bed, edges charred, spine scarred. Her throat ached, but no tears came, just ink and resolve. In her journal she wrote, "They say I'm too sharp to love, too bold to belong. Maybe love only comes to the meek, or maybe it hasn't met me yet." Outside, the wind howled across the desert flats, and far off, beneath a starlit void, a rider sat unmoving on a stallion the color of sorrow, watching the flicker of Evelyn's window. He didn't believe in much anymore, but something in that small light made him stay. Come sunrise, Evelyn returned to Dustmere, not as a citizen but like a ghost tethered to unfinished business. The town was the same squeaky signs, choking dust, iron rhythm of the forge, but the people? They moved around her like she was made of smoke. No greetings, just grim glances. The children were hidden indoors. One boy, Eli, peeked through a lace curtain and offered a quick wave before being yanked away by his mother. Her heart cracked like frost under boots, but she didn't let it show. She stepped into the general store, seeking flour. Mr. Purdy, the owner, was behind the counter, pretending his glass polishing needed deep focus. "Morning, Mr. Purdy," she said with civility. "No credit," he snapped, eyes on the glass. "I didn't ask." "No business either," he cut in, finally meeting her gaze, ice cold. "Try towns that don't mind your type." The words hit like a slap. Her kind. She turned and walked out, shoulders tall but insides bruised. Outside, the sky stretched like a wound pale, yawning, unforgiving. She wandered, not knowing whether she was seeking redemption, purpose, or just proof she hadn't disappeared entirely. By twilight, she returned to her small home. As the golden dusk turned bone grey, something unusual caught her eye. A folded piece of paper tucked between the slats of her door, unmarked. She opened it cautiously. Neat handwriting. 4 words. Don't let them win. No signature, no hint. But it surged through her veins, like a shot of fire. She looked around, eyes darting, nothing but wind and shadows. Was it the boy? A repentant woman from church? Or was it him? She hadn't forgotten the man on the saloon's second floor, Cal Thorne, the squint-eyed watcher with the face of a myth and the silence of a grave. He hadn't said a thing, but he had seen her. Not just looked, but seen, like he recognized something broken in her because he'd lived with the same fracture. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. The cabin felt like it was shrinking. She sat by the window, fingering the note, her mind flipping through memories like old pages. Her parents' voices, the wonder in young girls' eyes, the sting of shame she never earned. She pinned the note beside her mirror. They hadn't broken her. Not yet. And in a room above the saloon, Cal Thorne watched the morning burn through the sky. No one knew much about him, no last name worth repeating. Just that he'd wandered in one day with no saddlebag, no past, and a stare that could freeze fire. Some claimed he came from the mountain tribes, others said he'd been in the war nobody mentioned anymore. His coat was battered, his belt buckle etched with someone else's initials, and his eye carried the weight of a man who'd seen too much. One scar, one squint, one legend, that devil with one eye. He never denied it. The saloon let him stay no questions, the blacksmith gave him work, strong hands were rare, even if they came with danger. He worked hard, drank little, spoke less, but every night, when the rowdies were gone and the piano was still, he'd sit by the upstairs window, reading an old leather-bound book with worn pages and strange markings. One evening, Evelyn caught sight of him. She was carrying firewood. She paused, staring up at that glow, at the silhouette hunched over a book. Something about the way his hand moved across the pagesses, if each word mattered, made her breath catch. She had never seen a man that rough-handle something so sacred. The next day, trouble came calling again. Two ranch hands, half-tanked on whiskey and cocky stupidity, cornered her behind the bakery. One grabbed her wrist, the other made a cruel crack about smart mouths needing silence. She fought, bit one hard enough to taste blood, but they just laughed. Then everything went still. A shadow loomed over them. Cal. He didn't shout, didn't draw his gun. He simply stood. The cowhands stopped grinning. "We was just joking, friend," one said, backing up. Cal didn't blink. He didn't need to. They left in a hurry, muttering curses, nursing bruised pride. And Evelyn? She didn't thank him with words. She just looked him in the eye. And for the first time in Dustmere, someone looked back without fear. She stood shaken, bruised, but defiant. Brushing dust from her skirt, Evelyn met Cal's gaze with steel in her voice. "Thank you," she said. He only nodded, silent as dusk, then turned and walked away. No dramatic exit, no macho posturing, just the low thud of boots leaving behind an imprint deeper than most men's words. That same evening, she found another note on her porch shorter than the first. Just one word, careful. No name, no explanation. But she didn't need one. By week's end, the entire town of Dustmere knew the name Cal Thorne, not because he introduced himself, he never did, but because of what happened behind the bakery. The story spread like wildfire, though the details were never clear. The ranch hands involved refused to talk. Just muttered things like, "That fella don't speak much, but he hears too much, sees through you." Whispers about Cal buzzed in corners. Evelyn began hearing his name in sentences that always ended in caution. Sheriff Moulton pulled her aside one morning, a grim look on his sun-leathered face. "You'd do well to steer clear of that one," he warned. "Word is, he once shot a lawman clean through in Kansas." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. And was the lawman innocent? The sheriff's frown deepened. He didn't answer. That was the thing about Dustmere, what they couldn't control. They feared. And no one controlled Cal Thorne. He kept to himself. Mornings at the smithy, muscles straining as he pounded red-hot iron into shape. Evenings perched in his upstairs window, that worn leather book cradled in one palm, his thumb always tracing the corners like memory lived there. But Evelyn noticed more. How he'd linger near the charred ruins of her schoolhouse, boots pausing where her blackboard once stood. How he sometimes passed by her cabin, stopping just short of her porch, never knocking, only watching. Not with menace, with meaning, like he was silently standing guard. One humid evening, she found him beneath the old church awning, legs stretched out, book in lap. "French?" she said softly, nodding at the page. "That's Les Miserables." He didn't glance up. "You've read it before," she continued. Twice, I'd guess. She sat beside him, uninvited, unfazed. You don't strike me as the poetic type, she teased. He closed the book slowly, each motion precise. People rarely strike true. His voice gravel rough, low and steady was more startling than his silence had ever been. Not because it was gruff, but because it was deliberate. Every word felt earned. She studied him, not as Dustmere's outlaw ghost, but as a man. His knuckles bore stories. His jawline whispered fights. But his eyes, they held fatigue, the kind that came not from labor, but from life lived too heavily. Where'd you learn French? She asked. He hesitated. My mother. Evelyn smiled, bittersweet. Mine too. That was all. No declarations, no sparks. Just two souls sharing a sliver of warmth under a church roof. In Dustmere, that was more intimate than any stolen kiss. When she left, she didn't feel quite so alone, and for the first time in years, neither did Cal. He lingered under the stars long after she vanished, hand resting on the book's cover, his mother's name Elisa faintly carved inside. She'd taught him how to read, how to love language, how to find strength in stillness. And she'd been buried for it. The air in Dustmere thickened, like a storm crouching just beyond the hills. Rumors raced through alleyways about Evelyn, about Cal, about the way they were seen near the church steps. Doors slammed harder. Conversations halted as they passed. Shadows stretched longer. One night, Evelyn woke choking on smoke-a-knot from inside, but nearby, she bolted out barefoot, the night wind slicing her skin. A small pile of firewood beside her porch was ablaze, flames licking up the edge of her steps. Someone had lit it. Someone meant to frighten. Heart-pounding, she doused it with her water bucket. Embers hissed, smoke curling like a ghost into the air, and then she saw it. A crude V scratched in the dirt beside her door. A warning, a promise. This time, they weren't hiding. At dawn, Cal arrived at her cabin unannounced. No knock, just footsteps. He circled the house, eyes scanning every track, every burn mark, every sign. Finally, he turned to her, voice like granite. Whose mark is that? She swallowed. Vance boys, their father owns the grain depot, they're easily riled. He gave a single nod. They won't do it again. Cal, wait! But he was already gone. By sundown, whispers rolled through Dustmere like thunder. The Vance boys had been found tied to the old willow outside the chapel gagged, shirts inside out, the word coward scrawled in red dye across their backs. No one admitted to seeing anything. No one asked. Dustmere split like dry bark. Some muttered, too far. Others whispered, long overdue. Mayor Elbridge Grafton, veins throbbing in his temple, called an emergency council. First, she poisons our kids with ideas. Now there's violence on our doorstep. This ends now. They had no proof, but they didn't need it. They only needed a target. That night, Evelyn found Cal behind the saloon, sharpening a blade beneath the moon. The steel glinted like truth. You can't fight the whole town, she said softly. I'm not, he replied. I'm reminding them what fear feels like. You terrify them. Good. She stepped closer, the air between them charged. You're not doing this just for me, are you? He didn't answer, but his silence said enough. Then he handed her a wrapped bundle. She unrolled it and gasped. Her mother's favorite book, The Light of Iridian, thought to be lost when the schoolhouse burned. How did you? Behind the pulpit, he said. Someone hid it. She clutched it like it was breathing. Thank you. He turned to leave, but halfway, he paused, back still to her. They won't burn you again. The next morning, Sheriff Moulton came knocking. Evelyn met him on the porch, arms folded, breath fogging in the cold. I'm here as a courtesy, he muttered, gaze avoiding hers. Things are spiraling. You mean someone tried to set my cabin on fire? He exhaled slowly. This town wasn't made for change. You've been stirring up trouble since the day you unpacked that chalkboard. Now Thorne's out here playing Avenger. This ends with a grave, or it ends quietly. She stared him down. Then punish the arsonists, not the woman surviving them. The sheriff pulled off his hat, rubbed his temple like truth gave him migraines. You're too smart to end up 6 feet under for being right. What are you saying? I'm saying, he sighed, by next full moon, be gone. No noise, no fuss. I'd rather see you leave breathing than buried righteous. He walked off. left her standing there in the wind, his words clanging louder than a funeral bell. That night, she didn't light a candle. She sat in the dark, the sheriff's ultimatum pulsing through her like a second heartbeat. Then came a knock. She opened the door to no one. Just a note resting on the step. If you go, they win. She clutched the note to her chest. Its message, simple and defiant, won't let that happen. No name, but she recognized the hand. Bold, even strokes, the calm at the center of chaos. She stared out at the trees beyond her cabin, heart racing. Was she foolish to stay? Reckless? Or was this finally her moment to stand tall where others had shrunk away? She found Cal at the stables the next morning, crouched beside a long rifle, cleaning it with a care that bordered on reverence. "They gave me a deadline," she said, voice barely above the wind. He didn't glance up. "Then we stay ahead of it." "I don't want to be saved," she said, her voice cracking like dry wood. "I want to be believed in." That made him look up. Direct, unflinching. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't," he said. The air shifted between them. "I used to think being smart made me unlovable," Evelyn admitted, tears catching at the edge of her lashes. "Like every word I spoke pushed people away." Cal stepped close, just enough for his shadow to merge with hers. "You're not unlovable," he said, his voice low, rough as gravel, soft as rain. "You're just too much for minds that stay small on purpose." She blinked hard. "You've got away with words for someone who barely uses them." A rare smirk touched his lips. "I only say what matters." They stood in that sliver of sun between silence and something unspoken to outcasts holding the line against a town that never truly held them. Then Evelyn turned, heart thudding in her chest, and walked away into the light. Cal watched her go and made a quiet vow. If they tried to silence her again, they'd hear him instead. That evening, as the sun bled out across Dustmere, the shadows stretched long, and with them, danger slithered close. Evelyn had stayed late at the chapel, organizing what few books survived the fire. Pages were curled, spines cracked, but the stories remained. As she stepped outside, the air was wrong too still. The town square was quiet, too quiet. Then came the voice. "Well, well, look who's still pretending she's better than the rest of us." She turned slowly. Kellen Grafton, the mayor's son, grin crooked, eyes glazed with cheap whiskey and cheaper pride. Two of his goons flanked him, snickering. "You think your books make you untouchable?" Kellen spat. "You think your pet gunslinger scares me?" "I don't want trouble, Kellen," Evelyn said, backing away. "Too late for that," he growled and lunged. She screamed, stumbling as his hand clamped around her wrist, dragging her behind the chapel. His friends laughed, circling. Evelyn fought, bit, kicked, screamed. But Kellen was stronger. Thinner crack of thunder. One shot. Kellen dropped like a puppet cut from its strings. Silence. Then another shot. The second man crumpled before he reached the alley's mouth. The third froze, hands raised, eyes wild. "Go," came a voice from behind low, steady, final. He ran. Evelyn sat up, breath ragged, staring at the bodies, dust soaked in blood. Cal stood a few feet away, revolver still hot in his hand, his face unreadable in the dying light. He didn't speak, didn't flinch. And for a moment, the world narrowed to just them. Then chaos. Bells, shouts, footsteps. The sheriff arrived to a town mid-howl. The mayor shoved through the crowd, fell to his knees beside his son, howling like an animal. "Arrest him," he roared. "He's a murderer." Cal didn't resist. Let them take the gun, let them shackle his wrists, walked between them like a man already judged. Evelyn blocked their path. "Wait," she said, voice firm. "Kellen attacked me. He would have—" "No one asked you," the mayor snapped. "You brought this devil to our doorstep." The crowd shifted, torn between horror and denial. "We'll settle it in court," the sheriff muttered, dragging Cal away. As they led him through the dust-choked street, Evelyn caught one last glimpse of his eyes. No fear, no regret, just one truth. He had killed for her. And he'd do it again. The courthouse hadn't seen a real trial in decades. It smelled of rotting wood and old hatreds. Every bench filled, townsfolk packed shoulder to shoulder, not for justice but for a spectacle. Cal stood shackled in the center, unmoved. He hadn't spoken since the arrest. Not to the judge, not to Evelyn, not even to the sheriff. Evelyn sat behind him, wrapped in stares like barbed wire. The mayor was first to testify, weepy, shaking, voice cracking, called his son a misguided boy, not a monster, painted Cal as a cold-blooded killer. No one spoke of what Kellen had tried to do. Then Evelyn took the stand. She stood alone, voice steady. "Kellen Grafton tried to hurt me," she said. "He would have taken everything from me, and if Cal Thorne hadn't stopped him, I might not be here." "Scoffs," a voice in the back jeered. "She wanted it." "Too proud," someone muttered. "Too clever." Evelyn's spine straightened. "This trial isn't about justice," she said. "About punishing people who refuse to stay small." The judge slammed the gavel. "Enough." The defense had no witnesses. Cal refused counsel. The room held its breath, savoring the fall. Then, from the back movement, a boy stood up, pale and shaking. Samuel, one of her former students. "I saw it," he stammered. "I was hiding near the chapel. Mr. Grafton grabbed her." She screamed. The others held her down. Then he pointed at Cal. "He saved her." Gasps. The mayor stood, face bloodless. "He's a child, frightened." But then the sheriff stood too, holding a folded note. "We found this in Kellen's coat," he said. He read it aloud. "She makes me feel like a fool, like I'm nothing. I'll teach her. She won't laugh at me again." The courtroom shifted. The gavel came down. Case dismissed. Charges dropped. The room erupted. Yells. Curses. But the verdict stood. Cal didn't move. Even free, he looked like a man still in chains. Evelyn rose, stepping toward him. But before she could speak, he turned and walked out the door into the daylight, into the dust, into the silence. Dustmere didn't heal after the trial. Not really. No one apologized. No one met her eyes. They just locked their doors tighter. The mayor buried his son alone. No sermon, no eulogies. His home became a tomb. The church bells rang low and bitter. Evelyn returned to her cabin that night, expecting Cal to come. He didn't. For days, she saw no sign of him. The saloon room stood empty, the forge cold. He was gone. Then, on the fourth morning, she found him at the edge of town, saddling his horse under a dying cottonwood. "You're leaving," she said. He didn't turn. "You're safe now." "That's not why I need you." His hands stilled on the saddle. "You don't need me, Evelyn. You never did." "That's not true." He looked up, really looked. The scar above his brow glinting in the light, his eyes full of old sorrow and quiet ruin. "They'll never forgive you for surviving," he said, "and they'll never forgive me for helping you. You think running fixes that? I think staying makes it worse." She stepped closer. Her hands trembled, but her voice held. "I thought maybe we weren't just surviving anymore. I thought maybe we were building something." He said nothing. She reached into her coat and pulled out the old book Les Misérables, the one he used to read by lamplight. She held the book out to him, fingers trembling. He didn't take it. "You made me believe again," Evelyn whispered, her voice softer than dusk. "In something more than fear, in something still and real." Cal looked away, jaw tight, then muttered so quietly she almost missed it. "They said you were too sharp to ever be loved. They lied." Her breath caught. "You're the only mind I ever trusted," he said, his voice gravel thick, "and the only heart I ever wanted near mine." She reached for him, but he stepped back. "If I stay, they'll come for me again, but next time, you'll pay the price." She shook her head. "Let me decide that." But he was already mounting his horse. Before he rode off, he pulled something from inside his quarter book, wrapped in cloth, inside, written in careful ink, Evelyn Drake, and beside it, Cal Thorne. A gift? A goodbye? Then he was gone. No final kiss, no whispered promise, just hoofbeats fading into the wind. Evelyn stood there long after the dust settled, the book held to her chest like a heartbeat, her heart fractured but not shattered. Not this time. The weeks that followed passed like slow pages in a novel no one wanted to finish. She stayed. Even when whispers curled around corners like smoke, even when neighbors crossed the street at her approach, even when the church stopped sending its Sunday invitations, she stayed. She rebuilt the schoolhouse by herself, one board, one desk at a time. It was smaller now, more worn, but it breathed with new life. A few brave mothers let their daughters return, then a few more. They came not hungry for bread but for something their mothers were never offered, permission to think. Evelyn taught them not just to read, but to reason, to question, to imagine. She taught them that knowledge wasn't shameful, it was sacred. And in those rare golden hours, when sunlight streamed through cracked windows and tiny fingers turned dusty pages, she remembered what purpose felt like. But her heart? That was another matter. Each night, she sat by her window, tracing the ink of Cal's name on the inside of that book, his handwriting careful, his silence deepening, his absence roaring. Some nights, she dreamed of him riding back over the hills. Other nights, she'd bolt upright, convinced she'd heard his boots on her porch. But it was only the wind cold and empty. Until one day, it wasn't. That morning, the wind carried rain, the kind that smelled like hope. The sky swelled dark, thunder murmured in the hills. Evelyn was locking up the schoolhouse when she saw it. A lone rider on the ridge. Her heart clenched, probably just another wanderer. But then he crested the hill. The black coat, the brimmed hat. Her breath left her. Her knees almost buckled. He didn't rush. He didn't gallop. He rode slow, steady, straight to her. When he dismounted, he didn't say a word. He didn't have to. She stepped forward, tears already clouding her eyes. "Why now?" she whispered. Cal took off his hat, holding it to his chest like a confession. The scar above his brow still split his skin, but his face had changed, not softer, braver, as if, somewhere in the silence, he'd chosen courage. From his coat, he pulled a slip of paper, not a letter, a marriage license. Signed. Her name. His. She stared at it. Then at him. He didn't smile, didn't explain. He just looked at her with respect, with hope, with love that didn't need performance. She laughed through her tears. "Still not one for talking, are you?" He stepped close, and in the first real rain Dustmere had seen in months, he touched her face gently, reverently, like a man who had spent a lifetime breaking things and had finally learned how to hold something sacred. She leaned in. He kissed her not like a gunslinger, not like a ghost, but like a man finally home. Dustmere never truly accepted them, but it didn't matter, because some stories don't need applause to be true. Some love doesn't need permission to last. They'd said she was too smart to be loved. They were wrong, because a man who never spoke had once drawn his gun to protect her. And when the moment came to speak his truth, he did it the only way he knew how. He came back. This story isn't about an outlaw feared by a town, or a teacher shunned for her mind. It's about a love that doesn't need to shout to be heard. A love that sees who you are and stays anyway. Have you ever felt like too much for the world to hold? Or found someone who cherished the very parts of you others feared? Tell us in the comments below. Because your story matters. And someone out there might need to hear it today. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes love can be quiet and still stronger than any storm.